Hi there guys, this is going to be the reassembly of the HW100. Now, in the reassembly we've got a seal kit and it's come from HW100 Tuning. No affiliation with them or anything like that, it's just where I got it from. All the bags are nicely marked and labelled up so I can just show you the bag and show you where the O-ring goes. Right, with that being said, we're going to get started. I'm going to start with the front block here. Now, as I said before, this is a self-sealed unit so we can build it up and pressure test it. With like Marvel rebuilds, I've made some small improvements along the way just to make the rifle operate a little nicer. So, first things first, we're going to rebuild the front inlet valve. Now, it's quite simple. There's a seal in the bottom there with a ball bearing and a spring, and then it's capped off with this front piece here. In my model there isn't a separate seal, it's just that little rubber piece in the bottom there. So I haven't got a seal to replace it, so we're going to leave it as is. This rifle was working very well before I took it apart, so I'm confident in that seal. However, different models may have different seals. So what we're going to do, put the spring in the back, and then just do it up. To tighten it, we're going to use a 10mm spanner on the bottom and an 8mm spanner on this top part and just nip them up gently. It's only brass, so doing it too tight and you'll strip it. Next we're going to replace this O-ring on the front here, and we're going to be replacing it with one of these red ones. Now it just pushes on like so. I'll just add a little bit of silicone grease to this front O-ring. Just a little bit. Now there is an O-ring groove around the back here, and I believe this is only for older models like the Mark I. This is a later model and uses the regulator piston sleeve. So the O-ring wasn't fitted to this model and I'm not going to replace it. So we'll set this to one side for a second. Next we're going to replace the O-ring in the front here. That's this one, the main inlet valve. I've already taken out the packet and that just drops in there. Then with a nice cocktail stick or cotton bud, we're just going to seat the O-ring down nice and firmly, like so. And again, I'm just going to add some silicone grease to this O-ring. Right, we'll set the block down for a second and we'll concentrate on the regulator piston and the piston sleeve. So we're going to replace these O-rings, and we're going to replace it with new O-rings. The regulator piston just uses the regulator piston one. Small amount of silicone grease on it, and just stretch it over. And for the piston sleeve, we're just going to use the piston sleeve O-ring. Again, a little bit of silicone grease and stretch it over, like so. And then the whole assembly can be installed in the rifle. What I like to do is build it up outside the rifle. That way you can ensure that nothing is going to go wrong. Install it like so. The hole on this model goes towards the front of the brass piece, and then we can just install it. I like to hold the rifle upside down and use a 10mm deep socket. Then give it a nice tighten, like so. Again, it's only brass, so it doesn't need to be done up within an inch of its life, it just needs to be nice and tight. Right, there's the rear of the piston there. And next we can reinstall the Belleville washers. Now I've cleaned these up and I've also given them a little polish. As you can see there, both the front and the backs have been given a polish, and they're ready to go back in. First of all though, I'm just going to add some dry lube to them, just so that they have a nice little bit of lubrication as they go backwards and forwards. And there we have it, nice and dry lubed. In my rifle we had 4 stacks of 4 paired washers, so 2 one way, 2 the other way, 4 times, so we've just repeated the stack to put them back in. Belleville washers going, nice and easy. And then finally we can reinstall the adjuster. I've seen some versions of this adjuster where it has a O-ring groove around the outside, but this version didn't. We're just going to screw it in gently for now, as we'll be readjusting the reg pressure at a later date. Okay, next we're going to turn our attention to this little breech block here, and what we're going to do is remove the transfer port O-ring. So I like to use a nice sharp pointy thing, stab the side of the O-ring, then lever it out. And here it comes, pull it out the back. As long as you're nice and careful and you don't slip, you're not going to scratch anything or damage anything. So there's the old transfer port O-ring, and this is a 1771. I'll just be replacing it with the 177 breech O-ring. So I've just added a little bit of silicone grease to that, and that can go in again with a toothpick. Just poke the O-ring down until it finds its seat. Like so. Nice and easy. And we'll just remove the excess grease. We'll flip it over, we see our valve seat. I've also given this a little polish. It was sealing before, but it was looking a little rough, so I just came in there with some very fine 2000 sandpaper, wet or dry sandpaper, and just cleaned the seat up, then gave it a little polish with a Dremel. So the valve should be able to seal on that no problem. So next we'll take this O-ring off. I found the easiest way to get these off is with a blade, obviously being nice and careful. Some of them seem to be glued on or fused with the breech block itself, so you have to go round a few times and just slowly lever it off. And there it comes there. We'll be replacing this, so we just give the seat a good clean. We'll put a little bit of silicone grease around this part, as we're going to push the O-ring into the body of the rifle. Then as we tighten the screws, this will be drawn into the O-ring. So it wants to be nice and lubricated as it goes through. Before we do that though, we'll just replace this little PTFE washer here with the new part. And that's just this piece here. There's the new one going on nice and easily. Stick that there. And now we can replace the O-ring that went on this surface here. This just is the breech block. And there it is there. Just going to put a little bit of silicone grease around it. Rub it in nicely. And I like to do the O-ring in the seat. Doing it this way just stops the O-ring from getting damaged as we screw the breech block in. Right, so now we can put it all together. Stick the valve in like so. Get our screws in position. And these are done up with a 4mm Allen key. And there we have it, nice and easy. Right, next I'm going to reinstall the barrel. Now you typically wouldn't do it at this stage, but as the bottle adapter that we're using covers the barrel retention screw, I have to do it now before we put this on. So the barrel's got an O-ring in this end, so we'll hook this one out, here it comes, and we'll put the new seal in. Now there's two sizes of seal, and it looks like I'm using the older one. So that seal there. Again, just a small amount of silicone grease around it. Put the O-ring on. And then reinstall the barrel. Typically you want to get the serial number lined up with this side so it's nice and easy to read. And then we can put the barrel retention screw back in. and do it up with a 2.5mm Allen key. Nice and tight so that the barrel's not going to move or twist on you. There we have it there. So next we'll stick the bottle adapter back on. So first of all, just put this little pin in the locating screw there, put the valve over the top and tighten it down. And that's done up using an 8mm Allen key. As you're doing it up, make sure the alignment pin is going in the hole that's on the bottle adapter, like so. And then we'll get it nice and tight with a proper L-shaped Allen key. Okay then, that's the bulk of the work done to the front block. The last thing we're going to do is set the regulator pressure. Now, I'm going to bring back my regulator gauge tester. We're just going to screw it in this hole here. I'm pretty sure that HW100 Tuning already sells a ready-made gauge. So if you need to check your reg pressure, then you can buy a complete kit from him. Right, with the gauge on, we can now pressurise the rifle. Okay then, so that's the rifle now pressurised, and we can see on the gauge here that we're reading 58.9 bar on the regulator. So we're going to adjust it using this screw here, and I'm going to set it to 90 bar for now. So to increase reg pressure, we're going to turn clockwise or turn in. We're just going to keep going until we're near the 90 mark. A little bits at a time. So we're at nearly at 85 now, so we'll just take the last little bits very slowly. Right, so 89. What I'm going to do is leave it there for now, let the rifle settle, and then when we get the other half of the rifle built up, we'll do a few shots just to see where the regulator settles at. So we'll stick this whole assembly to one side for a second, and we'll start work on the rear section. So I've done a little bit of work to the rear block, mainly on the components that bolt to it, but I've given everything a good clean, removed all the old grease, and it's ready to go back together. First thing I'm going to do is add the little detent back for the cocking arm. I'm just going to add some molly grease into this hole so it's nice and lubricated. Drop the pin there in, and I will mention that I've given the top of the pin a nice polish up so it's nice and smooth when it rides on the cocking arm. Put that in like so. Then we can just add the little spring to the rear of the pin. Put the little cover over it, and then finally add the little screws using a 2mm Allen key. And there they are. The little pin has a cutout on one side, and this little flat piece here fits in this stamped part. It's hard to get it round the wrong way. And there it is there. So next we'll add the indexing arm for the magazine, and I've just given this a good polish up. This is the main surface I concentrated on here, as a little piece of metal rubs against this, so this wants to be nice and smooth. So what we need to do is put the arm in, get it roughly lined up, and then hook the spring over the top, and then our little pin can be pressed in from this side. It does have a tapered side to the pin, so that side goes in first obviously. And then it can just be tapped home. Made myself a little peak punch so that we don't damage the block. The pin just wants to be near flush. That's how it was before I took it out, so that's how it's going back. And our arm still works very nicely. Next we'll go ahead and put back the magazine indexing, and that's this piece here. And again, I've just cleaned this up, taken all the rough edges off and made everything nice and shiny. So that drops in. Just have to move the arm to one side and then it drops in the hole there. So now that's in, we can reinstall the little lever, and we're just going to put a small amount of moly grease on all the moving surfaces. This will just make it operate a little smoother. Not that it was particularly rough to begin with, but it goes in this way up. Then we can put the large ball bearing in first, then the short spring, the little tiny ball bearing, and finally we can cap that off with a grub screw. And that's just using a 2mm Allen key. And then keep tightening until the mechanism has the desired tension that you want. That's about it for me. Nice and clicky clacky, but not too tight. And then to finish it off, I'm just going to add a very small amount of dry lube to the indexing system, just to make sure it's nice and lubricated. Like so. And we can just wipe off the excess. Okay, I'm going to stick the block to one side at the minute. I'm going to bring in the hammer and hammer spring assembly. So in this rifle I'm going to be fitting one of HW100's adjustable hammer spring units, and you saw in the disassembly me taking off the old anti-tamper unit. But what I've done is I've just made a nice PTFE guide for one end and another one for this end as well. Now I've cut this portion down and I've left it at 8mm long, so that 8mm is sticking out, so that hopefully I'll still be able to cock the hammer when we fully assemble the rifle. If I have to take it out again and cut a little more off, it won't be an issue, but I did want something there to carry the front of the spring, and with a nice PTFE guide on it, it's going to really work well. Aside from that, I've just given the hammer a good polish. The trigger sear runs on this surface here, so I just went over that nicely with the auto salt on the Dremel, and generally just cleaned up all the bits that I think would benefit from a clean up. So that's there, it's looking nice. Next thing I did was work a little bit on the pellet probe. Now the probe collar here that went on felt awful graunchy, and it wasn't very smooth at all. Now it doesn't really rotate, but it felt quite rough, so I just gave it a quick little polish, and that really can't hurt. I've also removed all the old grease, cleaned the holes out, and just generally deburred everything. There was a couple quite nasty burrs in this portion here, so I just took them off with a file. So before this goes together, what I'm going to do is just add a small amount of moly grease in there, so that the probe collar is nicely lubricated. Whilst we're here as well, I will install the pellet probe buffer. And that's just that O-ring there, the pellet probe buffer, and that just goes on the front there. Small amount of silicone grease as usual, and all that O-ring does is provide a little bit of cushioning to the pellet probe as it goes against the block. And then lastly, I just cleaned up these components here. These two pins go in the pellet probe and attach the cocking arm to it, and provide guides for the hammer spring and hammer. And this part here is just the indexing block. As the hammer gets pulled back, this moves in the block and rocks the indexing arm up. So I just gave that a nice polish there. It's quite pitted, so I didn't go too mad, but I just took all the edges off and made it nice and smooth. Right, so before we install all the assemblies, what we're going to do is just add some moly grease to the block, just so that everything is nicely lubricated. And there it is there, all lubricated ready for this assembly to go in. So we'll loosely assemble it. Two pins going like that, and this front one just catches the arm of the cocking arm like that. Your spring hooks on the front there, and then the rear portion hooks in this little cast piece, and that cast piece wedges in the block. It's a little tricky to do, it all sort of has to go in at once. It's a little bit of a pain, but once you get the hang of it, it's not too bad. And I've just added a small amount of moly grease to these slots here where the pin's running. Once we've got it all loosely held together, we can start putting it in the block. So what I like to do is just get the hammer started. Okay, so what I like to do is get it started in the rifle, make sure all the pins are lined up, slowly push it through, not forgetting to attach the spring to this front portion. And as it goes through, hook the little cast piece onto the back of the screw, and just slowly push it home. You may need to give the cocking arm a little wiggle to get everything to move forward. Then just keep pushing and jiggling until everything goes through. Like so. Then we can just bang this pin in to secure everything. Doesn't need to be in all the way for now, it just needs to catch the end of the arm to stop everything flying back out. So I'm going to leave the back off, as I'm going to need to adjust the hammer spring in a minute anyway, so I'll leave it off for now. Whilst we're here at the front, I'm just going to attach our little indexing block again. That's done with a 2mm Allen key. Just make sure it's seated in the gap, and then do it up nice and tight, like so. And as we pull the arm back, it should index nicely. Okay then, so I'll just quickly drive this pin in. I'll do it off camera as you've already seen me taking it out, but all I'll do is use a punch in the end there and tap it down. Okay then, now that the rear block's all built up, we can attach it to the front one. So the front regulator's still 89, so we'll leave it as is for now, and we can readjust the hammer spring to suit the power level we want. Locate the little tabs, and then start the screws in the holes. Then we can do these up with a 4mm Allen key. Just for completion's sake, I like to get my little surface plate out, put the block on top, make sure that there's no undue rock or movement in there, which there's not, so the bolts can be tightened up nice and securely. Yep, still nice and flat, so we know the dovetail's nicely aligned. And last thing we can do is reinstall the trigger. Now, I've given the trigger a little bit of work, mainly clearing out all the old grease, giving these tops a good polish to make sure that the hammer goes along them nice and easily, and giving all the main contact areas some moly grease and dry lube. So the trigger feels really nice now, cocks nice and easily, and the release is very nice as well. So to get this rear screw in, we have to cock it and put the safety on. That exposes this bolt, and then when we've got this rear screw in here, what we have to do is flick it to fire again and decock the trigger. Right, then we can just put the trigger unit in and tighten it down with a 4mm Allen key. So it feels really nice to cock now. Very little effort. I'll decock it because we haven't got a moderator on at the moment, but it does feel nice to cock. Lovely and smooth. so I've got high hopes for it. Okay then, that's most of the work done. We've rebuilt the rifle, everything seems to be operating correctly. The next thing we need to do is adjust our hammer spring so that we're under the 12 limit and getting the power that we want, and then remove the regulator tester and just fit the blanking plug. So what I'll do off camera is just set the power, give it a few chronographs, make sure we're running nice and consistently and there's no problems. Then I'll bring you back when we fit the stock. So I'll just show you quickly how to adjust the power. So in here we've got the adjustable hammer spring. If you haven't got the adjustable hammer spring fitted, what you have to do is throttle the power with the regulator. Bit of a faff to do, but it's the only way you can do it if you don't have the adjustable hammer spring. So with the adjustable hammer spring, do is cock it, tip the end out, and this screw here is a locking screw, and that's operated with a 1.5mm Allen key. So if we wanted to change the power, we'd undo the locking grub screw, then with a 5mm Allen key just go in the end. It's hard to do while holding the gun and trying to show the camera, so I won't actually do it now. But you undo the grub screw, then come in here with your Allen key, 5mm, and in increases the power and out decreases the power. Obviously we're in the UK, so we're bound by the sub 12 pound rule, so this rifle is running nice and under that limit. Once you're happy with your power setting, we can go ahead and restore the back cap. That's just that piece there, and two 2mm screws. There we are. The very last thing we're going to do is remove the regulator gauge tester and fit one of these little blanking screws. This little blanking screw in the bottom there, and all this screw does is replace the ball bearing that's in there from standard. First of all, what we're going to need to do is take the bottle off. So like I said before, couple turns. I've got the single shot loader in there, so I'm just going to take that out and watching the gauge, making sure it's going down, which it is. Now that the rifle's out of there, unscrew the bottle completely. Just makes it easier to handle, and then we can take our regulator gauge out. I already have an O-ring in there, so since I'm going to replace it, I'll hook that out. That's simply done with a little pokey thing. There's the O-ring fully out, and we'll just put a new O-ring that you get in the kit. In the kit you get a number of little O-rings, so we're just going to replace the one we took out with this one, and then fit our little cover screw. First we're just going to seat this O-ring so that we don't damage it when we screw the screw in, like so, and then put the new one in. And that's with a 3mm Allen key. Make sure the screw's flush. And there we have it. So now we should be able to just connect our bottle back and we have no leaks. And there we have it. No leaks. Can't feel any air escaping. So, job done. So, last thing we need to do is refit the stock. Giving it a little clean up, and it's ready to go back on. So this one's got a little trick to it. We have to sort of hook the bottle around the stock, and then once you get it past that bit, it should just fall into place. And then we can just put the stock bolt in and do that up with a 4mm Allen key. You'll notice I've taken the old Picatinny rail off, as I'm going to be replacing it with a nice Atlas one. But I'll do that later. And there we have it. Really nice rifle, all put back together, all works, all sealed, and super smooth in its operation. Okay then, now that I've had a play with the rifle, had a poke around inside, I thought I'd just give you some final thoughts on it. Now for me, I was never really that interested in the HW100. I'd heard that people were having good luck with them, and that they were good rifles, but the traditional styled stock and the really small air cylinder put me off from buying one. But having a look at this one, it really is easy to see why people like them so much. The action is smooth as silk, the mechanism works lovely, and now that we've went inside and polished everything up, it really does work nicely. It's got a really nice trigger on it, and I'm a big fan of the spring assisted cocking arm. I think that's a really nice touch. With the form laminate stock and the bottle conversion on it, it's turned this rifle into a fantastic one. So the only thing I don't like about the rifle is that there's a number of cast components in the block. Mainly this front valve block here, the piece that encapsulates the valve seat and the transfer port, as the aluminium valve seat can wear, and I've had two guns now that the valve seat has actually let go and is allowing air to move through the barrel. It isn't a really hard fix, you just have to polish up the valve seat, make it nice and shiny again so that there's no burrs or any lumps that are in the valve seat that will stop the valve from seating properly. But it would have been nice to have like a steel insert that you can replace easily, and with the valve seat being steel it's less likely to wear out. And the only other thing that I could possibly grumble about is the two-piece blocks. I know why they've done it. From a design standpoint, it's hard to do a lot of the drilling from this side when you've got a whole another block in the way, and the way they have made it seems to work perfectly well for them. But when I was looking at buying one of these rifles, the two-piece block system sort of put me off it. But having said that, now that I've taken one apart, I know what's in there and I know how they're aligned, it wouldn't be a problem for me in the future. Okay then guys, so here we are down at Pete's Airgun Farm, and we're in the 50-yard range. We've got the rifle rough zeroed and we're just starting pellet testing. So I just want to say I'm using a low magnification scope for this, so my shooting probably isn't going to be the best. I'm only using an 8x zoom, whereas I prefer to be up in the sort of 16 to 20 range. But nevertheless, we got some pretty good groups at the end once we found our pellet, and you'll see them in a minute. So while you're seeing me shoot, I just want to talk a little bit about the setup of the rifle. So we started with the reg pressure at 90 bar, and we was pretty much maxing out the hammer spring to achieve the power. This put a lot of preload on the valve, and I wasn't really happy with this setup. So what I did was I took the rifle apart again and reset the regulator pressure to 100 bar, much closer to where it was originally. What this done was allow me to back off the hammer spring quite substantially, and now there is just a very small amount of preload on the valve. What this should do is make the rifle much more efficient, as the hammer bounce won't nearly be as pronounced. Or that's the general theory anyway. And with the reg set at 100 bar, the rifle sounds much more crisp, and it seems to be shooting really well, so I'm quite happy to leave it at 100 bar. Now that that's out of the way, I shot 3 groups of targets. The middle ones were just using some Air Arms 844 pellets. I think they were 5.2 head sizes. On the right was JSB Schultz, which are another 844 pellet, although they are substantially shorter than the standard 844s. And on the left hand side we shot some heavies. These are 5.1 head size, and they seem to be the pellet that the rifle really likes. Right then, here are the results of the shooting. These ones were the best groups obviously, and these ones were the 3 I did last. If we take our 5p piece, all the groups fit nicely within a 5p piece. So at 50 yards I'm more than happy. Even some of the pellets that weren't so good, they still fit under a 5p piece, some of them. So you can't really grumble at that. If I'm honest, I probably could have made these groups a little tighter if I had a higher magnification scope. But I'm really happy with the results. The rifle worked, done its job, and I was more than confident in it. And if I'm honest, it's changed my opinion on the HW 100 series of rifles. They've gone from something I would never see myself owning to a rifle that I can very much see myself getting in the future. Anyway then guys, that's going to be it for this one. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.